The sun glinted off the polished asphalt, and I felt the familiar thrill as I gripped the wheel of my car. Speed was freedom, power, control. Dante had always loved to watch me drive. His eyes sharp, calculating, full of the kind of desire that twisted into ownership. I had trusted him once. Trusted him with my life. I didn't know that trust had already been shattered. The moment came without warning. A slight jerk in the brake pedal, a hesitation that shouldn't have been there, and the world tilted. I pressed harder, heart racing, mind screaming, but the car didn't slow. "Not now," I whispered, gripping the wheel as panic clawed at me. I saw it then. The wall rising too quickly, closing in, inevitable. The seconds stretched, endless, unbearable. I slammed the brakes again, useless. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught them. Dante and Serafina standing at a distance, watching. Not running to help. Not calling for aid. Just watching. My chest tightened. The betrayal hit harder than the impending impact. And then the crash. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. Smoke rolled into the cabin like a living thing, choking and thick. My seatbelt burned against my skin as the world twisted violently around me. I didn't think. I reacted. Survival was instinct. A sudden, powerful force yanked me from the inferno. Strong arms. The smell of smoke and sweat. And a voice that cut through the chaos. "Hold on. I've got you." Gage Miller. His face was set, determined, every inch the hero I hadn't known I needed. He pulled me free just as the car erupted behind us in flames, a wall of heat and fury that could have been my end. I gasped, coughing, shaking, every part of me trembling, not from fear exactly, but from the raw, fiery clarity of survival. I looked at him, the world narrowed to his eyes, his hands, his presence. "Thank you," I managed, voice hoarse. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You're alive. That's what matters." The crowd that had begun to gather murmured, but I barely heard them. My life had shifted in the blink of an eye. Trust shattered. Betrayal exposed. And yet I was alive. That night in the hospital bed, I replayed every moment. Every lie Dante had told, every glance, every subtle manipulation. The image of him standing there, Serafina smiling at him, waiting to inherit what she didn't earn. It burned into my memory. And beneath the fear, beneath the pain, something else grew, a spark. Cold, dark, determined. He thought he could end me. He thought he could erase me with steel and fire. But he had only awakened me. I would not be the broken, terrified woman he expected. I would be stronger, martyr, relentless. As I drifted into a troubled sleep, I made a vow. No one would ever control my life again. No one would profit from my pain. Not Dante. Not Serafina. Because from the ashes I would rise. And this time I would be the fire. The hospital walls were too quiet. Too sterile. Too safe. I hated them. I hated the way they made me feel fragile, small, like the world could swallow me whole if I didn't stay perfectly still. But I wasn't fragile. Not anymore. The moment I was released, I went straight to Dante's office. I told myself it was curiosity. It was checking details. But the truth, I knew it deep down, was that I needed to see him exposed. The door clicked behind me as I slipped inside, careful not to alert anyone. The office was immaculate, as always. Polished floors, gleaming surfaces, and that subtle scent of wealth and control that Dante always cultivated so meticulously. But today, it reeked of arrogance. And that arrogance would be his undoing. I found it on his desk, tucked under a pile of papers as if it were a casual note rather than the trap it truly was. The insurance claim. I recognized it instantly. The dates, the formatting, the signatures that weren't really signatures. It was pre-written, predated, pre-planned. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from fury. He hadn't just tampered with my car. He hadn't just left me to die. He had planned the aftermath too. The narrative that I had suicidal tendencies. The story that would have justified a payout and allowed him to buy a ring for Serafina with my life as collateral. I laughed softly, bitterly. The sound echoed in the empty office, a private symphony of rage and triumph. He actually thought he could get away with this, I murmured. File cabinet drawer creaked, making me freeze. My pulse quickened. But it was empty. No one had seen me. No one knew I was here. Just me and the evidence that would finally allow me to fight back. I read through the claim again, taking mental notes. Every falsified line, every pre-planned justification, every tiny shred of his arrogance. He had left a trail and I was going to follow it. This wasn't impulsive revenge. It was calculated. He had underestimated me. He had assumed survival would leave me weak. Instead, it had made me precise, alert, dangerous. I slipped the papers into my bag, careful not to disturb anything else. As I turned to leave, my eyes landed on a photo of Dante and Serafina laughing together. The same smug expressions. The same self-satisfaction. I pressed my lips into a tight line. Not for long, I whispered. Outside, the city moved obliviously. People walked past, distracted by their own lives, unaware of the fire that was being lit quietly, invisibly, in one corner of the world. And that fire was me. By the time I stepped back onto the street, the determination in my chest was solid, ironclad. Dante had assumed he held all the cards. But he had forgotten one crucial truth. I had survived a crash that should have killed me. I had survived betrayal and fire and abandonment. And now, armed with proof and fury, I was ready to reclaim my life. I just needed the right partner for the fight. And I knew exactly who that would be. Gage Miller. The name still echoed in my mind every time I closed my eyes. The man who had pulled me from death, whose hands had been the first warmth I'd felt after betrayal and flames. I hadn't seen him since the hospital, but I knew I needed him, not just as a witness, but as someone who understood the gravity of what Dante had done. I found him at the fire station, the smell of smoke and equipment thick in the air. He looked up as I approached, surprise flickering across his face. "Michaela," he said, stepping closer. "I wasn't expecting to see you so soon." "I needed to see you," I said, keeping my voice calm. "And I need your help." He studied me silently for a moment, his brow furrowing. "Help with?" "The crash," I said, holding the pre-written insurance claim carefully. "Everything Dante did. The brakes, the plan, the claim. He intended for me to die. And now he's trying to profit off it." Gage's jaw tightened. "I saw the wreck. I know he didn't help. But, you have proof." I handed him the papers. "Not all of it. But it's a start. And I know you have access to the fire marshal's report." His eyes darkened as he glanced at the claim, anger flickering. "You were supposed to be gone. And he planned all of this." I nodded, gripping the strap of my bag. "Yes, and I need that report, every detail. Everything that proves the brakes were tampered with." "He's already shopping for a ring for Serafina with my life as collateral. I'm not letting him get away with it." Gage's expression softened slightly, but there was steel in his eyes. "You're brave. More than anyone I've ever met. And yeah, we can do this. Together." Relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. This wasn't about gratitude. This was about action. I had survived fire. I had survived betrayal. And now, with Gage at my side, I had the skill, proof, and resolve to confront the man who tried to end me. We spent the afternoon going over every document, cross-referencing dates, and compiling the evidence. Each revelation made my pulse quicken, not with fear, but with the cold thrill of inevitability. Dante's confidence, his arrogance, his smug assumption that I'd never catch on. Everything was about to crumble. Finally, as the sun began to dip behind the city skyline, Gage looked at me. "You've survived worse than anyone should. And now you're ready. Ready to confront him." I met his gaze, feeling a fire ignite deep within me. More than ready. I survived a car fire he thought would kill me. I survived the betrayal he assumed would break me. Now, it's time he faces consequences. He nodded. "Then let's make sure he can't walk away from this. Ever." For the first time since the crash, I felt fully in control. The fear that had gripped me in the hospital was gone, replaced by clarity, determination, and a burning resolve. This was no longer about survival. It was about justice. And Dante Vane would pay for every second of cruelty he had tried to impose on me. The city seemed smaller that day, as if the universe had shrunk to focus entirely on what I had to do. Dante moved through his life confidently, completely oblivious to the storm building behind him. He thought I was broken, fragile, and compliant. He was wrong. Gage and I worked quietly, methodically. Every piece of evidence mattered. The pre-written insurance claim, the fire marshal's report confirming the brake tampering, the subtle details that would prove intent. I had survived fire, betrayal, and abandonment. Now I would wield proof like a weapon. "Do you think he suspects anything?" I asked Gage, keeping my tone casual, though every nerve in me hummed with tension. Gage shook his head, calm and steady as ever. "No. He's arrogant. That's why this works. He won't see it coming until it's too late." We reviewed the report again. Every detail of the brake lines, every note of investigation, every timestamp. It was all perfect. Legal, indisputable, undeniable. Dante had tried to manufacture an accident, and now I had the evidence to dismantle his lies entirely. I couldn't help but remember that day, standing beside my burning car, gasping for air, seeing him watch from a distance. The memory burned, not with fear but with icy fury. That was the moment I was reborn. He thought he could extinguish me, but all he did was forge me into someone untouchable. "Are you ready?" Gage asked quietly, breaking through my thoughts. I turned to him, steady, composed. "I've been ready since the moment I walked into that office. This isn't about him anymore. It's about justice, and making sure no one else ever falls into his web." He nodded. "Then we go together. You don't have to face this alone." We moved that afternoon like shadows, unnoticed, precise. The confrontation was coming, but it wouldn't be explosive or dramatic. There was no need. Evidence spoke louder than threats. Law spoke louder than rage. I allowed myself a small smile, cold and calculated. Dante thought he held all the cards. Every scheme he plotted, every twisted plan he believed would ensure his success, was already undone. And when the moment arrived, when he stepped into the insurance office expecting a smooth payout, he would find nothing but truth standing in his way. I glanced at Gage, whose calm presence grounded me. "It's time," I said. He placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Then let's finish this. Together." I took a deep breath, feeling the fire inside me flare, not uncontrolled but perfectly harnessed. I was no longer the terrified ex-model. I was Michaela Shaw, reborn from fire and betrayal, armed with proof, resolve, and the only heat I would ever truly need. Gage's unwavering presence by my side. And Dante Vane. Soon he would learn the price of cruelty. The insurance office smelled of polished wood, leather chairs, and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. Dante moved through it confidently, his arrogance filling the space like an invisible fog. He didn't know I was coming. He didn't know that every plan he had counted on, every lie he had crafted, was already crumbling. I stepped inside with Gage at my side, calm and composed, carrying the fire marshal's report in one hand and the pre-written claim in the other. My heels clicked softly against the floor, announcing my presence just enough. Dante looked up, and for the first time in months, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. A flicker of fear. He tried to mask it with a smirk. "Ilara, no, Michaela. I didn't expect." "You expected me to be gone," I said smoothly, cutting him off. "You expected me to disappear, to be a casualty in your little game. But I survived. I'm here. And you? You're about to see what happens when you underestimate someone you tried to destroy." He laughed nervously, glancing at the documents in my hand. This is nothing. You can't prove." I held up the fire marshal's report. "Oh, I can. Brake lines tampered. Pre-written insurance claim. Date set before the crash. You planned my death, Dante. And now you'll pay for it. His face went pale. He looked around, as if expecting someone else to appear and save him. There was no one. Only me. Only Gage. Only the evidence that stripped him of every ounce of control. A clerk walked in, hands shaking slightly as she saw the documents. I need to verify these before processing the check, she said, glancing at Dante, suspicion now creeping into her tone. Dante stammered, the smirk gone. It's a mistake. You're out of excuses, I said coldly. You gambled with my life, and you lost. Every dollar you thought would buy Serafina's loyalty, every scheme to profit from my death, it's over. The clerk nodded at me, already preparing to take legal action. Dante's eyes darted to Gage, and that's when I saw it. The realization that no hero would rescue him this time. No flames, no lies, no manipulation. Only justice. He faltered. Panic replaced arrogance. And when the call came summoning the authorities, it was almost anticlimactic. The man who had tried to end my life was being led away in cuffs. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and relief. The fear and anger that had burned in me since the crash were finally released, tempered by the calm certainty of justice. Gage reached for my hand, squeezing it lightly. You okay? He asked. I nodded, the first true smile of freedom spreading across my face. More than okay. I'm alive. I'm whole. And I'm done being afraid. Dante would never harm me again. Serafina would never inherit what wasn't hers. And I had reclaimed not only my life, but my power. The fire inside me was still there, burning bright, but now it was tempered by clarity, and the only heat I needed was right beside me. Gage and I stepped out of the office together, and for the first time I felt completely untouchable. The city was quiet that evening, the sky painted in deep purples and golds. I stood at the edge of a rooftop, the wind tugging at my hair, and for the first time in months, I felt completely free. Free from fear. Free from betrayal. Free from the weight of Dante's cruelty. Gage stepped beside me, his presence calm and solid, grounding me without words. He didn't need to say anything. His hand brushing mine, his steady gaze, was enough. I can't believe it's finally over, I said softly, my voice almost lost in the breeze. He nodded. It's over because you didn't let it destroy you. You survived. You fought. And you made sure justice was served. I smiled, but it wasn't smug or vengeful. It was quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing you've reclaimed your life and your power. The fire that had saved me was no longer fueled by rage. It was tempered by strength, clarity, and resilience. We walked through the city streets, side by side, talking about the future. I realized that life could be more than survival. Could be about choosing strength, partnership, and trust. With Gage, I didn't need to hide, didn't need to be anyone other than myself. You're different, he said at one point, looking at me in a way that made my chest tighten. Stronger. Martyr. Unstoppable. I had to be, I admitted, or I wouldn't be here. He smiled, a gentle warmth that made me feel safe in a way I hadn't in years. You're not just alive, Michaela. You're alive on your own terms. The words resonated. I had been reborn not just physically but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Dante and Serafina had tried to erase me, but all they did was forge me into something better. Someone who could survive fire and betrayal, someone who could rise stronger than before. As we reached a quiet park, Gage paused, looking at me with an intensity that made my heart flutter. I've seen people go through fire before. But you're different. You don't just survive. You thrive. I laughed softly, shaking my head. I didn't know thriving could feel this good. He offered his arm, and I took it without hesitation. Together we walked into the twilight, the city lights flickering like sparks in the distance. I realized then that my life had changed irreversibly, not because of the crash but because of how I chose to respond to it. I had turned fear into clarity, betrayal into strategy, and survival into strength. And as Gage's hand held mine steady and unwavering, I knew one thing for certain. I didn't need Dante's fire or Serafina's lies anymore. The only heat I would ever need was the kind that made me feel alive, protected, and powerful. For the first time I felt truly whole. I was Michaela Shaw, reborn from fire and iron, untouchable, unstoppable, and finally free. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Dante's presence, once commanding, now seemed small and faltering. The arrogance he carried into the office, into the streets, into my life, had been stripped from him. Today he faced the consequences. I sat beside Gage, my fingers brushing his lightly. The warmth was reassuring, grounding me in a way no court or judge could. We had worked tirelessly to ensure every detail of the case was airtight: the fire marshal's report, the pre-written insurance claim, and the testimony that proved intent. There was no room for Dante to escape this time. "Ready," Gage whispered, his steady voice grounding me. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "As I'll ever be." The prosecution laid out every piece of evidence with precision. The jury listened, rapt. Every photograph, every document, every testimony painted a picture of a man who had tried to destroy me. And for the first time I watched as the truth did its work. The arrogance drained from Dante's face, replaced by disbelief and desperation. I didn't feel triumph in the traditional sense. Not satisfaction born from revenge. This was deeper, quieter. It was the satisfaction of reclaiming my life, proving my strength, and ensuring that cruelty could not thrive unchecked. When the verdict was read, Dante's shoulders slumped. Guilty. Every charge accounted for. Justice had been served. I exhaled, a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Gage squeezed my hand gently. "You did this. All of it. And you didn't lose yourself in the process." I smiled at him, feeling a profound sense of completion. "We did it," I corrected. "Together." After the courtroom cleared, we stepped outside. The air was crisp, alive with possibility. The city buzzed around us, oblivious to the drama that had just concluded. And yet I felt entirely changed. "You know," Gage said, eyes on me, "you don't have to survive alone anymore. You've earned strength, but you've earned someone to share it with too." I looked at him, the man who had pulled me from fire and guided me through the aftermath. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. He had always been the anchor I needed, the heat I could trust, the partner I had never known I deserved. "I think I'm ready for that," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Not because I need someone to protect me, but because I want someone to stand with me." He smiled, a small, tender thing that made my heart feel lighter than it had in months. "Then I'm here. Always." I realized then that the fire I had carried for so long, the rage, the fear, the fury, had transformed into something more powerful: clarity, trust, and love. The trauma had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. And as we walked together into the evening, side by side, I understood something crucial. Surviving betrayal doesn't just make you strong. It makes you unstoppable. And love, real, unwavering, earned love, can be the only heat you'll ever truly need. The morning sun spilled across the city skyline, painting everything in gold and rose. I stood on my balcony, breathing in the crisp air, feeling it fill my lungs with something I hadn't realized I'd missed: pure, untainted freedom. The city hummed below, oblivious to the journey that had brought me here, but I didn't care. I had survived, I had conquered, and I had chosen the life I wanted. Gage stepped out beside me, his hand brushing mine naturally. I didn't need to look at him to know he was smiling, steady and reassuring. He had been my anchor through fire, both literal and metaphorical. And now he was more than that. He was my partner, my equal, the only heat I would ever allow to touch me. "You know," he said quietly, his gaze sweeping the horizon, "we could let this city keep running and never tell anyone what we've built. But I think it deserves to know." I glanced at him, a small, confident smile playing on my lips. "Let them know. Let them see that I survived. That justice can be relentless. That strength isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving." Gage squeezed my hand. "Then let's thrive. Together." And we did. Days turned into weeks, and our lives became a dance of shared purpose and quiet joy. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were building. Each morning, I woke knowing that Dante's cruelty no longer dictated my worth. Every decision, every choice was mine. The fire inside me was no longer fueled by rage, but by clarity, ambition, and a love that didn't require compromise. One evening, as the city lights flickered like tiny stars beneath us, Gage turned to me. His expression serious but soft. "Michaela, you've been through hell. But you're still standing. Stronger than anyone I've ever met. And now, you can let someone in." I laughed softly, the sound light and free. I let someone in a long time ago. I just didn't realize it until now. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from my face. Then it settled. No more running, no more hiding. Only fire, only strength, only us. I leaned into him, feeling the warmth that had been absent for so long. The world outside might still be filled with danger, with betrayal, with unexpected challenges, but we faced it together. I thought back to that night in the burning car, to Dante's smug face as he watched me almost die. And I realized something vital. Surviving that fire had given me more than life. It had given me power, clarity, and the wisdom to recognize what, and who, was worth keeping. And Gage. He was worth everything. I had risen from ashes. I had walked through fire. I had reclaimed my life, my strength, and my heart. Now I was free, untouchable, and loved. Not because I needed protection, but because I had found someone who matched my fire with steady, unwavering strength. We stood together, the city glowing beneath us, and I felt a fierce, unshakable certainty. This was my life, my world, my love, and I would never let anyone take it from me again. I was Michaela Shaw, reborn, unstoppable, and finally, fully, fiercely alive.